Panic Room is a thrill ride that all takes place in a single New York brownstone, where the heroes and villains are locked in a battle of wits. After his previous films, this was David Fincher's attempt at a popcorn movie, so let's see how it turned out. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Say the F word.
No, we're on YouTube, David. That'll get us demonetized or some shit.
Oh no!
I like how I immediately said shit, which
exactly.
is less severe, as noted on YouTube, as well as most rating schemes for content. But anyway, welcome everyone. This is a movie podcast. We are working through the films of David Fincher, kind of to celebrate the fact that sometime next month we'll have his new release, and we'll do that when it comes out. But we have so far done 7. For Patreon, we did The Game. Last week we did Fight Club. And now this episode, we're looking at Panic Room from 2002. Yes.
AKA by far the most notable film he made, and the one that everyone always remembers.
That sounded like a little... There was an edge to that, David. You've been a bit sarky? Been a bit...
What? No. I didn't sit through 2 hours of this movie just waiting for it to end. What are you talking about?
Oh dear. Well, we'll get to our thoughts, although I feel like David is playing his hand a little bit early here. So yes, the basic premise of this, and we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers. But the basic premise is that Jodie Foster plays this newly divorced mum with their young teen daughter played by Kristen Stewart. They move into a big brownstone house in New York, and they've got a panic room, right, as the title would imply. And on their first night there, some thieves break in looking for money they believe to be hidden in the house from the previous owner, and it becomes this sort of cat and mouse game where they're hiding in the panic room and these criminals on the outside. And it's, it's a thriller, it's a popcorn thriller. That is the basic gist of it. So we'll get into all those things. Now, can I, so before you say anything else, can I just ask, had you seen this before? Was this a first time viewing?
I remember trying to start it at one point, but I don't think I even made it into the panic room. I don't think they even introduced it. I was out within like 5 minutes for whatever reason. So effectively, no, I have never seen this movie.
Okay, good to know. I have seen this. I saw this probably a few times. It was something that played on the movie channels a bit back in the sort of early 2000s after it came out. But yeah, we'll get into other things. But yeah, we'll just kick things off with the basic thoughts, which David seems to be coming in hot here. David, what did you think of Panic Room?
I think this movie has a fantastic concept, and that's about it. I also think David Fincher got new tech where he is able to do that opening sequence from Fight Club where we just trace the camera really long distances, and he decided he wanted to make a whole movie just doing that, regardless of if he had an actual plot to it. So for me, I think that this movie, like I said, good concept. I think that it had some cool little, the best way I could describe, as you said before, is cat and mouse aspects. You have one group that plans to do something, and then another group has to rapidly react, and it's interesting to see how they come in conflict with each other. Again, concept, A+ there. But I cannot find a reason for this movie to be as long as it is. And it's not very long. It's under 2 hours, but it just feels so dragged out. It feels like everything is dragged out beyond the point where it makes sense for tension and just starts becoming annoying. And then my final thing, without going into spoilers, is I think this third act falls flat on its face. I don't think it wraps up satisfyingly at all. So yeah, not too happy with it overall.
Okay. That was a lot of hot taking. I quite like this movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
I like this more than Fight Club and the comment. I mean, also The Game, but no one cares if I say that.
No one cares about The Game.
No one cares about that. Which is not to say that I think this movie has as much to say as Fight Club. Of course, Fight Club's got a lot more, subtext, a lot more going on in it. But I think this is a very good example of a single location movie. And when I was just I wasn't even looking for like facts or like trivia or anything. I happened to find when I was looking up something about the movie that Fincher intentionally wanted to do a movie set in one location because Fight Club had like 200 locations or something stupid like that. So he wanted to make something that was confined. He still had production problems, and we'll talk about there's one big notable thing that we do have to discuss about the movie's creation. But I like a bottle movie. I like a movie, especially a thriller that's set in one location. I actually do think the runtime is just fine for it. I think I think it's interesting because the villains are the ones who are having to do the problem solving, but it's these types of movies where it's usually the protagonist, admittedly. In this case, it's mostly the villains. Although the protagonists eventually do it as well. Is that it's okay, there's a set of rules, we have to figure out how to like solve the problem given these rules that we've been given. And those rules are simply, we want to get into the panic room. I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say the thing they want is unfortunately in the panic room. So they want to get in the panic room. And they can't because it's built to not be, breakable.
Yeah.
it's solid steel.
The villains are handed an impenetrable box and say, get inside.
Yeah. So it's all about them trying to figure out a way to solve that problem, and then when they do something that will affect the characters on the inside, how they then try to solve the problem to like counteract it and whatever. And I have fun with all that. I think it's a really fun.
I agree.
David Fincher agreed. David Fincher said he wanted to do a popcorn thriller, and that's the phrase I use because I think that's exactly the description I'd use for this. It is a popcorn thriller with a solid cast and fun sequences. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I don't have any critiques either. I do think the visual style of the movie, I'll agree with the CG transitions where, the camera goes through walls and stuff like that is a bit iffy. I also think that, I don't know if it was shot on like digital HD video or not, but it has that look to it where the blacks are very crushed and kind of noisy, but not in the way that film grain looks. It looks at times kind of ugly, but not because the cinematography's bad, but just because the type of recording, instruments they're using gives it a certain look that I don't necessarily always like. It's I especially felt it early on actually when there was daytime scenes, because it felt like those looked too dark and too grimy for what they were. It's like it's going too far into that Fincher like smeared in dark green kind of puke yellow vibe. So I do think there's things to critique. I will agree that there's one element of like the ending that I do think is maybe a little unsatisfying, but for the most part, I think it does the right things by having, you're different. You've got a more sympathetic villain. You've got a villain who's more of like a dangerous wild card and is like the real threat. You've got the jeopardy of like, okay, she has to keep her daughter safe, but she has to take risks to do that. She has to take risks to try and call for help, so on. So yeah, I think all that's super fun. So I thought it flew in, to be honest, when I watched this morning. So,
and that's fair. I definitely see the appeal of it. I get all that, and I 100% agree that I enjoy the sequences. I enjoy the smaller bits of here is them trying to get into the room. Here is how they fight back against that and back and forth, because it's clever. It is clever. But I enjoy it more in concept than I do in the way they actually execute it. It constantly feels like every single one of those sequences for me could have a good minute and a half trimmed from it every single time, if not more. And I think that it just pads out a little bit too long. And then in terms of characters, I enjoy pretty much everybody here. I think this movie was casted great. You're saying like the wild card. The wild card dude is played by Jared Leto. That's perfect casting. You think the other one's the wild card?
The ski mask dude's I'd call him the wild card. Although I think Jared Leto is perfectly cast. I agree with that statement because he is playing the idiot who's in over his head, and it is the most I've ever accepted him in a movie role in my life. Is this? Yep. He's got cornrows in his hair. Come on.
Oh yeah, no, he's awful. And then of course the more nicer one, the one who's more sympathetic is Forrest Whitaker, who of course is more known for his heroic roles, so it made sense that he was a bit more likable in this.
He's a big cuddly giant, Forrest Whitaker will take care of you. That's what it feels like.
Absolutely.
So you get that vibe from him. I think it's well cast. I like the single location. I like that it really sets out what the geography of the house is, so you understand the floors, you understand that the panic room's on the second floor, the top floor's got other bedrooms, so you understand where everyone is when things kick off and how like much that you understand the elevators there. It really sets up the geography, and you understand how long it takes for someone to get from the stairs to the panic room, and that's used a few times.
I also really think it does a great job of doing that, because the opening of this movie is quite literally a realtor showing them around the house.
Yeah.
And that is such a smart way to set up the geography of here's how everything is related to each other. He's literally walking you through it and explaining everything, because that's his job.
It's natural exposition. It feels very natural to have this guy saying this. And it's almost like frustrating to watch because the kid is preoccupied, especially Jodie Foster, as they're being shown. She's kind of like ignoring him and not paying attention. And I think as the audience, you're like, no, pay attention, because this is probably going to be very important when you're trying to survive in like 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you kind of like get frustrated with the character, and in a healthy kind of way, where you're like, hey, this is important. So
there's a point very early on in this movie where they make a point of saying that the door to the panic room will not shut because it's got like an elevator sort of sensor to it, where if something's in the way of these two lasers.
It's visual though, yeah. You see this green laser, it's about eye level, and there's another one about sort of like thigh or shin level, I'd maybe say.
Yeah. And he makes the point of saying like, yes, there's one at this height and this height, so that way the door won't close if anything's in it. I'm like, that leaves a lot of room for stuff to still be in it. If there's only two lasers going on, and then of course that's setting up something that happens later on in the film.
Yeah, but I actually think that's quite smart, because it's very plausible that the thing that happens later still happens. It's just because it very clearly defines again what the rules of this thing are. Like, this is a mechanic, we've introduced it, and we've stated clearly how it works, and nothing later betrays that. Yeah.
No, it does a great job of setting up its rules. I'm not going to argue that point at all.
So. No, I have a lot of fun with Panic Room. It's one that I remembered enjoying. I hadn't seen it in a long time, because for a long time, for whatever reason, this took ages to get any kind of HD released. I believe there is a 4K Blu-ray now, although on iTunes where I watched it, it was only in HD. But for a long time when I was collecting Blu-rays, back when everything was sort of slowly turning HD and getting their HD remasters and whatnot, this for some reason was kind of lingering, and it took a while, and maybe it is because of the shooting style and whatever they used to shoot it. Maybe it was more difficult to remaster or something. I don't know. But regardless, it's I think the cinematography itself is quite good. It's just the the medium of which they have chosen to shoot it on. I do think looks a bit ugly sometimes, with how it compresses the dark spaces, and you get these kind of. It's entirely possible. Maybe the 4K version completely fixes this by just having such an insane bitrate that it doesn't have that problem. But I feel like it's just, in the same way that film grain's inherent to the image and it should be there, I feel like what I'm seeing in this is probably always going to be there on some level, because it's just part of the technology, and that's
how
just
they shot it back then. Yeah. For me, the only, like I said, the criticisms I have, I think it looked fine. I don't think there was any real flaw, except, as we said, those transition bits with the CGI.
He loves to play around with that and experiment, especially in this time period. Even the opening title sequence, which are these giant I mean, obviously the text, I mean, not if you go far back enough, but typically text is usually technically CG because it's just text from a computer. But these are these big 3-dimensional letters that are up against buildings in Manhattan, and honestly, sometimes they were kind of hard to read, and I felt like you're showing off here, and it just doesn't feel quite.
I mean,
good.
it's the way that we introduce any location in the TV show Fringe. Like, it's just that, but I guess this was newer back then. This was something that they really wanted to show off of compositing.
This was about 9 years, well, 7 or 8 years before Fringe.
Yeah.
But I feel like Fringe had them with a bit of colour, though, so you could always read them. I feel like this white, even though they had like a bit of a shading on it, it still, depended on what building and what text was against the building, some parts of the words were actually quite difficult to you had to really look at them and pay attention. And if you have to pay that much attention, it should be easier to read.
I mean, I think while I get it that they're doing the opening credits in a more interesting way than just flat text on a screen, as long as I can read Panic Room, I think that that's mission accomplished. I feel like you get the concept of, okay, this text is the actors' names. It's not really necessary to be able to read them. for the sake of the movie, you know?
Oh, sure. It's just I think what would have been better is to have the regular names be more traditional, just coming up on the screen, but have the title be the one that's fancy and like is in the sky and up against the building.
That would work.
But
I think I feel like no, go ahead.
I was going to say it's almost like, oh, we're going to spend the rest of the movie confined in this one house, this one brownstone. So we're going to just like get here, enjoy all this open space in the sky because you're not going to see it for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to get at, is that it feels like this and also the CGI transitions are both interesting tools, new things that David Fincher was like, hey, we can play with this, but it doesn't feel like they really tie into what the movie's trying to do. It doesn't feel like it's giving this sense of confinement or giving this idea of being trapped, especially the CGI transitions, which I don't even know if we fully explained yet in this review. Basically, his whole thing is he just does a oneer via CGI where he moves about the house, like through various household objects that obviously a camera couldn't fit through, and even phasing through floors, but it's all pretending to be one continuous shot.
Yeah, so it's real in parts, but there's obviously the CG bits to transition and, you know.
Right.
I think I understand that more. The opening titles, I completely agree. It feels like it doesn't fit, like, because the rest of the movie's this confined movie. So it's weird that the opening's like, hey, all these big letters in the sky with all this open space. It does feel kind of contradictory almost in tone.
Yeah.
Whereas, at least the transitions, I understand that he's still sort of playing with the geography of the building, at least. He's still trying to like make it clear, hey, 2 floors under them, that's where these guys are right now. He's almost... I think it's unnecessary. I think the movie does a good job explaining the geography anyway. You don't need this. But, you know, like, obviously, this was just a sort of thing, like, he clearly liked to experiment with this, because he already did it in Fight Club. Fight Club had a few of them, you know, with the going down to the van with the bomb and all that stuff. Like, he was already toying with that in his previous movie, and here he just wanted to go further with it and like really push the limits. And I'm not sure where he sort of said, you know what, this is like, I'm over this now. It might literally be the next movie we do, which is Zodiac. Where he's done, I don't remember it in Zodiac, but it's been a while.
Neither do I. Yeah.
So maybe this was just like a 1999 to 2002 little kick he was on.
Yeah, but see, for me, I feel like it goes against the theming of the movie. You want to feel trapped. You want to feel like you are stuck in this place. But then you're given this camera that is able to literally phase through floors and could just go anywhere at once in this building. I feel like it kind of goes against that idea of you're stuck here and you can't leave.
I get what you're saying. I think the logic behind it is that you're showing where the barriers are. The fact that the camera can go through doesn't mean the characters can, obviously. So
I think that it's used very well during the first major time they use it, which is when the villains of the movie come to break into the house. It specifically tracks them walking around the house. It's
showing you them try to like do all the different points of entry, and then eventually Forrest Whitaker's the one that's able to get in an upstairs place. But
yeah, I think that that's done very well in both a theming and a sense of like giving us the information that we need in the movie, because at this point they're not confined yet. It is still this free-flowing, they could be anywhere in the house. But once they get into the panic room and it's supposed to give this sense of claustrophobia, I just feel like it should have stopped, and instead they keep on doing it every, like, I don't know, 15-20 minutes for a while.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't love them, certainly, because they don't look very good by and large when they happen. Some look better than others depending on what the transition elements are. You know, it just kind of varies. There are some that I think are okay. I won't give the context for spoilers, but there is one where the camera kind of comes out through a little pipe to reveal kind of like the exterior on a wall, and I think that one looks alright because it's kind of showing just how little it is in the context of the wall, and that's important for the scene.
Well, see, but I also think that you're saying it comes out, it shows the exterior of the wall. That gives that sense of being able to move again. That's being able to not be confined in this place. I think that works for there because that is the same sort of theme that it's going for.
Yeah, because it's an exit. I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have a problem with the thematic thing that you do, which is I don't necessarily feel that the camera moving around here makes it feel like it's less confined per se. I just don't think it looks very good.
No, that's fair. So, if we both dislike it for different reasons, that's fine.
Yeah. So I mean, at that point we're kind of an impasse or whatever. But
yeah.
So Yeah, I mean, as far as anything else before we get into things, we should probably talk a little bit about. So I'll go down the cast, but also talk about the recasting that happened in this, because I was looking up things and I was like,
Okay.
oh, some of this I remember vaguely hearing about, and some of it I did not know.
This is one of the few I haven't really looked up much on, mainly because I didn't care to. So this is all news to me.
So Fincher was determined to have a nice straightforward production that was all in one big set that he could control, but there were still problems. So I don't remember how much they shot of it. I think maybe that was something like a week or two. They shot like a good chunk of movie over a couple of weeks with the original star. That original star was Nicole Kidman.
Oh.
And the reason why she left, it wasn't some dark, she didn't have a falling out with Fincher or the studio or anything like that. She was injured. So she had like a fracture or something that was kind of lingering from Moulin Rouge, and it, like, her ankle or whatever properly went whilst they were shooting Panic Room. And it was like, oh, she can't come back and like shoot anything for months. Like, she's going to be out of commission for a while.
Wow. Okay.
So they basically, according to Wikipedia, they kept shooting scenes that didn't have the mother or daughter in them. So they just shot the villain stuff as best they could without. And then eventually they went through some different options and they cast Jodie Foster, obviously, ultimately. The other bit of casting, although this didn't change after shooting, this changed before shooting began. Originally, the daughter was going to be Hayden Panettiere from, like, Heroes.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know why she dropped out before shooting started, but she was replaced, obviously, with Kristen Stewart. So this was just an interesting bit of trivia. This was almost a Nicole Kidman Hayden Panettiere pairing.
That is strange.
Yeah, it's strange to think about it like that. I think Jodie Foster obviously is a very solid actress. I do wonder if the movie would have been a slightly bigger hit, because Nicole Kidman undoubtedly had more star power at this time period specifically.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, just picturing her doing some of the things that Jodie Foster does, it brings a different energy to the role. I could definitely see it getting a bigger draw because of it.
Yeah, although, to be fair, I actually think Jodie Foster might be better suited in a way, because she feels more like... She feels less like Nicole Kidman is a glamorous actress. Jodie Foster feels like a real woman, right?
Nicole Kidman is a movie star.
Yeah,
like,
Jodie Foster is an actor.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Like, people are probably like, it's hard to define what I'm trying to say here. Just that Jodie Foster, when I see her looking tired in this movie and she's struggling with the fact that she's going through a divorce, I really feel that from. I really sense that. When I see Nicole Kidman try to do those sort of things, I'm like, no, she's acting. She's been a movie star.
I mean, obviously there was some level of makeup done for Jodie Foster in this movie, but most of it is done to look like, no, she was asleep when all of this started. She doesn't have eyeliner. She doesn't have like any of that going on. I can't imagine Nicole Kidman not having something,
And maybe she wouldn't have. Maybe this would have been a role where she did look genuinely different than she normally does.
True.
But bizarrely, I do think Jodie Foster is probably the better fit, although I do wonder what the Nicole Kidman version would have been like if they actually got to finish that.
I mean, I do want to point out here that Nicole Kidman is still in the movie, apparently. She is the voice of the girlfriend of the divorced husband on the phone.
Oh, really? They give her a cameo.
Yeah,
that's
so
nice.
She was still around.
They wheeled her into a recording booth in post-production and said, hey.
Maybe that was like required by some level of like guild rules or something in order to get her paid. Is that like, if you don't show up in any of the movie's final cut, you get a significantly lower amount, whereas you gotta like have a tiny little something to be there?
I mean, I didn't want to be cynical and just thought, oh, Fincher gave her a cameo as a little nod that she was meant to be in the movie. But yeah,
that's true.
Maybe there is like a legal, like, little thing reason they did it. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so that's just an interesting bit of trivia for the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Kristen Stewart's here. Obviously, a good 5-6 years before she would turn in her performance as the tragic romantic damsel that is Bella in Twilight.
You say turn in such negative connotation there, as if it wasn't the performance of a lifetime.
Look, when you go into class and you hand in your essay and you know it's getting like a C-, like you're handing it in.
That's fair.
You're not slapping it down and going, whoop, there it is, and like doing a little dance as you back away from the teacher's desk,
Yeah. Looking at her filmography, she only had one credited role before this in a movie called The Safety of Objects. That's it.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, this is only her second role, but obviously she has went on to have a career. We know who she is. Yeah. She's done other things.
I especially loved in the opening credits of this movie, they bill everybody before the title except for Kristen Stewart. She's one of the very few people who comes in after the title comes up.
Yeah. So Forrest Whitaker we mentioned. Dwight Yoakam plays sort of the Raoul, who's the wild card character,
Yes.
who's more dangerous. And we have Jared Leto as Junior, who is useless. And we'll talk more about that in spoilers.
I mean, he is the inciting character, more or less, but yeah, he's
useless.
He's useless in the plot.
To be fair though, he did like I wouldn't say them until spoilers, but he did get a couple of legit laughs out of me. This movie was strangely comedic at times. This movie had some strange moments where it felt like it should have been very tense, and they instead go for a comedy beat, and it's not detrimental towards the tone of the movie. It feels like these are characters who are just trying to figure things out, and they're gonna do some weird stuff at times. Yeah. Eventually, this is a really minor role, but eventually there's a police officer played by Paul Schultz, and he's been in he was in the fourth Rambo, and he was in other things. I just want to point out here that this is a year after he turned in a performance in the hit film Mimic 2. And I only know that because we did Mimic 2 as a bonus Ace episode last month. So
there you go.
It was fresh in my mind.
It's Shulls month, I guess, here at Mild Buzz.
Yeah, why not? So, yeah, that's basically the cast that's worth mentioning. Music-wise, there is music. It's kind of understated. It kind of goes under the radar and just sort of builds tension. There's not a lot of big themes that are playing throughout the film by any means.
No, not that I can imagine. Not even any licensed music either, because obviously that is something that Fincher uses in a lot of his films as licensed music, but I can't recall a single licensed song playing at all.
If it was fleeting. Maybe when the daughter had a radio on for a second or something like that, but there was nothing memorable on that front. So yeah, I guess we'll go into the spoilers then. So warning for Panic Room. You've been warned of spoilers. We'll get into everything. So the movie's main character, her name's Meg, right? Jodie Foster's character's name's Meg, and she has just divorced her husband because the husband's decided to get a young hot babe wife, right? So
apparently Nicole Kidman.
Nicole Kidman, who obviously isn't actually much younger, I don't think, but we only hear her voice, so she's playing younger here. She's playing 25 in this.
Yep.
So basically, the movie opens straight up with her walking with her daughter, and I actually didn't know what relation this older woman had to. I don't know if this was meant to be her mother, or if this was just her lawyer, or her agent, or something. I don't know.
The way I read it is that this is just her real estate agent. She's in the market to buy a house. She hired a real estate agent, and this is her.
That makes sense. That makes complete sense. The reason why I thought grandmother is the way that she kind of when Jodie Foster is too timid and doesn't want to tell her daughter off for doing something. This woman jumps in and says, "Kid, no scooter in the house," and just snaps. And I was like, "Oh, that's the grandmother's stepping into discipline." That's what that felt like to me.
That's fair. I typically think of grandmother as much more friendly, but if you've got your own things you got to deal with here, Pete, that's fine.
No, so would I really, but I'm saying that in light of the parent being too docile,
that's fair.
Maybe the grandparent steps in because that's who they are. But anyway, so the husband was filthy rich apparently, so she can afford to buy a brownstone in Manhattan.
This was the part I wasn't sure on. Is she just basically saying, "Hey, buy a house for me so I can live in the area despite the fact that we're divorced," or did she get half the money in the divorce?
I don't think they ever specify. She does say later on the idea was to live in the same area, so the daughter could go, easily go visit her dad, whenever.
Right.
But I don't think they ever specify. I assume she got half the money, and this was a decision. But yeah, maybe he is paying for this directly. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Either way, I mean, obviously they're amicable. They're okay with each other. It's mostly for the kid, though, it seems, because they are splitting custody there.
Well, I think, the movie's not a huge character piece, obviously, but there is a little bit of a character arc. And at the start of the movie, Jodie Foster, like we said, she's too, hesitant to, tell her daughter, and it's not like her daughter's doing anything too bad. She's just listening to music or riding her little scooter around or, pressing buttons she shouldn't be, stupid little things. But she's too timid to say anything. She's crying in the bathtub at the pressure of like having to do this move, and she's, you know, very claustrophobic with the panic room as well. She doesn't like the idea. She keeps the door of it open when she goes to bed because she doesn't like the idea of it being there. Yeah. And all of this is basically to say that she kind of like the movie in a lot of ways is about her kind of like, you know, growing up here and building up her confidence and being willing to fight for her daughter and herself, because it kind of feels like she's just passively just accepting things. You know, this other woman, you know, the agent or grandmother, whoever she is, she basically says, "No, you should buy this place. It's really good value. You'll never get anything like this anywhere else in New York. You should buy this." And she just kind of agrees ultimately by the end of the scene with the realtor showing them around. But it never really feels like it's her decision, and I think that's why it's important that the final scene of the movie is her and her daughter looking through the newspaper for houses and like just picking ones based on what she wants. She's actually engaging in the conversation. She seems to care about where they're moving. Whereas here, she's very detached. It's not much, but it is a bit of an arc of like, okay, this is where she starts and where she ends by the end of the story.
Yeah, I mean, like I said up front, I have problems with the third act. I have problems with how it ends. And while I didn't initially consider this as, like you said, an arc of her not having an interest in where she lives to having an interest in where she lives, that feels like the smallest possible arc.
It's not much, but I mean, to be fair, that just represents how she's like her willingness to move on. That's what the arc really is. That's just how it's been represented, is through her, you know, ambivalence over this first move, and then actually wanting to discuss this with her daughter and actually take part in it at the end. You know, because the entire first like segment of the movie is like, oh, I just ordered pizza for dinner, maybe I should have done more. And her daughter, and that's the thing, it's not just the other woman that's like more assertive. Her daughter even says, no, F that. Like, and F that, you know, slut that he's with. Like, she says that to her mom, and she's like, no, don't say that. And she's like, no, screw him, because like he did this to you. And like, you know, so it's her being willing to like, I don't want to say stand up for herself necessarily, but
yeah, no, it's the difference between being passive and active.
Yeah.
She's very passive in her own life. These things are happening to her, and then she, over the course of the movie, becomes active. She makes decisions.
Which is why it fits perfectly with the idea of the panic room, because for a large point of time, the plan is to just be passive and stay in the panic room, but there's necessities later on that say, oh, she has to make active choices to try and, she has to put herself in danger to, you know, save her daughter at various points, things like that. So it's not like a super deep arc. Like, it's definitely nothing that I'd say is like, you know, award-winning script writing material or anything like that, but there is something there. It's not completely devoid of like something for the character.
I don't think there isn't anything. I even think that it does a good job of arcs on at least one of the villains. Forrest Whitaker. I think he does a great job.
Yeah, he absolutely. If anything, he gets the most characterization in the whole movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. You get this great feel. Even just as soon as he appears in this movie, you get this idea of he doesn't want to do this job, but he has to. And as soon as like these obstacles start coming up, because when they get into this house on the first night, no one is supposed to be here, according to Junior. Everyone's supposed to be gone. Just
on that point. So it turns out Junior, we find out later that he's actually the grandson of the guy who lived here before, right? And there's the lore, it's weird to call it lore because it's not that much, but is that this guy was sick in his last few years, and that's why there's an elevator installed in the house. But he had a safe in his panic room with what Junior claims to be $3 million. We later find out it's actually $22 million in bonds. But he basically says, no, like no one's meant to move in for 3 weeks. They said 14 days. And Forrest Whitaker just turns and looks at us like, in what world is 14 days 3 weeks? And he's like, business days. And I'm like, okay, that's a good response to that, but I've got a feeling that it's not actually business days.
Oh, no. And even as soon as he says it, he looks to the other guy and it's just like, right? It's business days. And it's one of those little comedic bits that like I really enjoyed, because it doesn't remove from the tone that they're setting up at this point. It doesn't remove from this tension, but it is just a funny little beat.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to set up, okay, this guy has connections. Only him, he's the only one that really knows this money's there. And he's brought in Forrest Whitaker, who we find out is actually he works for the security firm who installs not only alarms and stuff, but panic rooms. He helps design and install these things. So he's there for his expertise. And Forrest Whitaker's not expecting the third guy. When this third guy shows up with a ski mask, and this guy never takes it off. Well, he takes it off eventually, but he never takes it off in front of them. Like, his plan is to never take it off. He comes in and he already seems kind of intimidating. You get the vibe immediately, and he shows that he's got a gun, like, and the other two don't. Yeah. So it's like, oh, wait a minute. So immediately, Forrest Whitaker doesn't want to do it. He's like, nah, there's people here. We're not putting people in danger. And they're all kind of whispering, and like, no, we should do it anyway. And ski mask guy is like, oh, like, I've got a gun. That we can take care of them. And this is all happening as Jodie Foster at some point wakes up to go for a piss.
Yeah.
That's how this all kicks off. She goes for a piss, and because the first night in this new house, she goes to the panic room by accident and turns on the light. And she does that thing which you don't see in movies that often, where you've woke up in the middle of the night, you turn on a light, and you're like, it's blinding. And she's like, and she turns around and goes to find the actual bathroom. And it's just lucky that she catches on the cameras in the panic room before she turns the light off that, there's people in the house. And she has to, and that's the first part of the geography really mattering, because we know that the daughter is asleep on the floor up above. She has to get upstairs, she has to get her daughter and get back down into the panic room. And that involves, like, because they hear that she's out, they're chasing her, she gets into the elevator with her daughter, they're going up and down, and basically they're able to stop on this middle floor after they've already lured them down at the bottom and run into the panic room. That's this whole section.
Yep. It's a wonderfully tense section. It does a great job, like you said, of setting up the geography. Unfortunately for me, as I was watching it, because of their bickering and stuff downstairs, I already had in my mind of like, wow, this is a really good Home Alone sequel. I'm really enjoying this. Yeah.
It kind of is, and we might be doing the Home Alones at Christmas this year, so
yes,
this is a precursor in many ways. Yeah, I think, it immediately sets up that Forrest Whitaker doesn't want to be a criminal. He's just doing this because he has money problems. He's got his own kids. He needs the money for some reason. Jared Leto's character, Junior, he's a spoiled rich kid who just wants money. He wants what's owed to him.
Yeah, it's not set up until somewhere in the second act what the actual relation is. They just kind of dodge around it for a while, saying like, oh, you need me because I know where it is. He never explains how or anything like that until finally it comes up of, he's the grandson of this rich guy who basically was not given as much as he wanted in the will, so he's trying to steal it beforehand.
Yeah, but no one knew about the safe, so... In fact, because there's a point in the middle where he wants to give up because it's getting too difficult, and he's like, you know what, screw it, I'll phone an anonymous tip and I'll inherit it.
It's like, I'll have to split it with my cousins and stuff like that, but that's still like a cool mill. And that's where all the other guys are like, I'm sorry, hold on. You have like 10 cousins, how is it still a cool mill for you?
This is the thing. When he said, I'll just inherit it, before he got to the cousins thing, I was like, wait, why didn't you just do that in the first place? Why do this illegal activity when you could have just said, oh, I know there's money in there, we need to inherit it? And then he mentions he's got like 12 cousins, and it's like, oh, it's because you don't want to split it with that many people. Okay, you're being greedy. I can understand that. That makes sense. That's fair. So, so basically when they get in the room though, Forrest Whitaker like sort of comes to the floor that they're on. He's like, wait, tell me they didn't go in that room. And they're like, yeah, they're in the panic room. And it led to one of my laughs, actually, is that downstairs at one point when Forrest Whitaker says, okay, I don't know how to get them out yet, but one of the things we should do is make sure they can't leave the rest of the house. So he goes around and like, puts screws and nails into all the windows so they can't be opened. And he's going around doing this, and he walks past like Raoul, the guy in the ski mask. So I can just say, Raoul and Junior from this point on. Yeah. But Raoul's the guy in the ski mask, Junior's Jared Leto. Raoul's got a sledgehammer and he's just bashing up into the ceiling, right? And the way Jared Leto, like when Forrest Whitaker asks, hey, what are you guys doing? And Jared Leto's not even doing it, he's just standing watching Raoul do this. He just turns and goes, we're coming in from below. And he looks so confident as he says it. He looks like, oh, we've figured this out. And Forrest Whitaker just sort of goes, even if you get through to the shell, it's like inches thick of steel, you won't even make a dent. And he walks over, and they keep going anyway because they're too stupid to take his advice. And would you believe it? 5 minutes later, when he walks past them again, and they've broke all the ceiling down, all the plaster and everything's gone. It's just this metal, and he's hitting it with a sledgehammer, and it's just going ding, 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 like nothing's happened.
Yeah, I think that as much as I dislike Jared Leto as a person,
Yes.
And I don't think that's a controversial take. I think that he is great to have in the first half of this movie before things like really need to buckle down and get extra serious. I think that he's great to have here because he does add that little bit of levity, and he's kind of the audience avatar in a lot of ways, in that he makes sure, he's so stupid that he makes sure to vocally explain the things as he's figuring them out.
I think that's what you also said there, is the idea that because, we'll get to why in a bit, but he dies halfway through. I think what you said there about him having levity in the first half is that I think things are tense here, when they're running into the panic room, and it's tense when they're trying different things throughout the first half. But I think the death of him elevates things in the next half, because he's kind of the middle piece between the two extremes. Forrest Whitaker's the super sympathetic guy who doesn't want to harm anyone, and what was his face? Raoul's the guy who seems to be willing to just shoot people in the head. Like, that's all he wants to do. He wants to do the extreme things constantly. And
the job's the job. We're going to get it done.
Jared Leto's the guy in the middle who's kind of playing, referee to this, right? And because he's also adding the humor, by taking that away, not only is Raoul murdering him halfway, raising everything, because no, he's just straight up shooting people now. He's getting more dangerous. You're also taking away that comedy character. So you're like, oh, we're just serious now. Like, things are getting worse. So it does a good job of making the audience feel like, oh, now things are really bad. Like, things were bad before, but now they're really bad because the light-hearted one who was funny occasionally is gone.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good point.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's very well crafted. I'm not going to say that all of the puzzles in this movie, all of the things where we're given the rules and then people have to think about how to overcome them, I think they're very well crafted every single time. Even in the first time of how do they get the daughter and then back down into the panic room. They set up this elevator thing early on, and they use its mechanics to basically dodge the villains and make their way in. It's smart. It's well done. But I also think that each of these sequences just has a little too much fluff in them. A little, like, sometimes it's only like 10 seconds. Sometimes it's a full 3-minute sub quest thing. But it's always a bit too long for me. So by the time it hits the end, I'm always just kind of grateful it's done rather than happy to have had the experience,
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I felt that way with any of it.
That's fair.
So, yeah, the first, after they obviously cut the phone lines and stuff like that, and they've nailed all the windows shut.
Well, they cut a phone line.
Well, yes, later on I'll get more specific, but for the sake of the time being, they've cut the phone line. Which is actually one of the first things they have to address, is that when the realtor was showing them around and he was showing the panic room, he's like, hey, there's a separate phone line in here, so even if someone cuts the phone lines, this one still works. You can still phone the police. But the solution to this for why they can't just call for help actually felt very believable, because it's the first night they're in this house, and Jodie Foster is only hooked up the main phone line. She's not set that one up yet. And it's like, honestly, it's the first night. Like, if you were moving into this place, like, what are the chances someone's going to break in on the first night? Like, you'd probably risk that.
I mean, even outside of that, I've moved into places and it's been a good 4 to 5 days before I got Comcast to come out with internet to hook up to my place. You're not going to get everything done on day one. And they even say that later on of no, to set up that phone line, it's not just calling AT&T. You got to call the security company, who then does a check, who then sends out a guy who then hooks up the phone line.
It's like an alarm system phone line, so it doesn't just go through the phone company. So basically, they Forrest Whitaker knows that they don't have a phone working in there, so they don't leave. Right, because there's a PA system, so Jodie Foster presses that and says, get out of the house. And even here, she's not being harsh enough, and her daughter's like, no, put in more F-bombs. Say, be harsher.
I mean, I thought, again, nice little levity.
Yeah.
It was a good scene.
No, it was good. So the other big laugh for me from Leto's character came after sort of the big first set piece, right? We see them looking in the panic room for supplies. There's crates with water and some basic food and stuff like that, in case you have to be in there for a while. And Forrest Whitaker gets an idea, right? Because the whole thing is we can't get in there. It's impossible. We have to have them open the door. So how do we do that? And his plan when he notices that there's a gas canister outside for the barbecue or whatever it is, he's like, oh, we just gassed them out. He goes hammering in the wall. Obviously, there's a ventilation so they can breathe in there. So they just start flooding it in with a little bit of gas. Of course, Raoul's a crazy man who wants to turn it up full and completely. And he's like, if they pass out, they can't open the door. Never mind die. So
I love how we have the rational thinker in why am I blanking on his name? Forrest Whitaker's character. His character's name is Burnham, which I don't think is ever said in the movie.
Oh no, it is because Kristen Stewart sees it on his because when he takes his jacket off, his overall says his name.
Oh, that's right.
And she calls him
right.
Burnham, and it's like a little moment of like, oh, she knows who you are now. Like she knows your name. But yeah.
Fair enough. But yeah, Forrest Whitaker is like the rational one. He always thinks through it. We have Raoul being the guy who like sticks to his guns the most. Like he's most unwilling to change his mind the whole way through. And then you have Jared Leto who just flip-flops. Like whoever's like the most recent person to talk, he's like, yeah, that's right. And so when we have him gassing these guys or gassing Jodie Foster in the room, and Forrest Whitaker points out that's not going to work, they're going to pass out, Jared Leto just bounces between the two of like, yeah, no, gas them out. Oh wait, right, they'll pass out. Turn down the gas a little bit.
Yeah, even the first thing he says, because he's sort of watching Whitaker do this, and he's not really getting it at first, and then once he realizes he's taping the hose to, and it's important that Raoul's already got it. Like Raoul's helping him because he understands what he's doing, and Junior's just looking like, what's going on? And when he eventually clicks, he goes, oh yeah, I was just about to suggest something like this. I'm like, oh yeah, sure you were, Junior. Very good.
Perfect.
Yeah. So,
he's gonna make good middle management material one day.
Well, no, he won't because he's dead.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, Jodie Foster, obviously they're coughing. There's like a little like pipe to the outside, like a little filter in the wall that goes to the exterior of the building. So Kristen Stewart's like holding her face down there to breathe while this gas is coming in. Jodie Foster tries taping up the vents. That doesn't really work. And then she finds a lighter in one of the crates, one of the supplies. And she basically is like, well, put this fire blanket on you, kid. we're gonna make them regret this.
Lovey.
And just as it's like about to happen, Forrest Whitaker kind of realizes, and the entire time Jared Leto's got his ears up against, because they're hearing some noises, they're hearing some clanking and stuff. It's like, what's that? And he's moving his head around like, I'm trying to listen to this. What's going on? And sure enough, now I don't know if the physics, the science of how this fire spreads is any way accurate. I don't know. But it's a good visual. It's a good visual. It spreads fire. Obviously, it goes all the way to the tank on the outside. Jared Leto gets set on fire. His face is burned, and he's freaking out. And I'll just mention this here, but later on when they're discussing something else and they hear another noise coming from the panic room, and one of them like goes up to try and listen, Jared Leto, and this is maybe the funniest thing he did in the whole movie to me, is he just goes, be careful. Like he's just so scared to go up against the wall now.
Just a straight PTSD from that wall. This sequence, like I said, I enjoyed it. I think it was a solid, like, well thought out thing. They showed you all the steps, and they showed you even how Jodie Foster responds to it. But this was, I think, one of the more egregious examples of it taking too long with fluff, because okay, she tries something first. It's duct tape over the vents. It doesn't work out. She needs another plan. I'm fine with that. But then when she comes up with the second plan, she gives the fire blanket to Kristen Stewart, takes the lighter, and instead of just lighting it, instead of just putting it, because the whole room is filled up with gas at the top at this point, she has to extend her arm the whole way down into the vent for some reason, and then click it like 12 times before it comes on. I understand that it's probably meant to build tension, but I'm already tensed out at that point. I know what's about to happen, and I'm just waiting for it to happen at that point.
I think now again, I don't know if the science of this pans out. I think the idea is she was trying to do it as like reach out as far as possible to do it so that she had time before the fire reached her. I think it was like a click and then duck kind of thing.
I guess, but I feel like it would have been much better to just like have it completely covering you, raise your arm up slightly, and then click it. Like that would have been easier.
Honestly, I think this. I get what you're saying, but it's like it is only like 30 extra seconds. I never felt like a hindrance to me.
No, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. This is on one of the shorter sides, but it just felt so egregiously obvious to me. that it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen here. It's not a matter of you're building up tension anymore. It's just us waiting for the bomb to drop.
I mean, I think it crescendos at a fine pace. This is the weird thing. You can keep, you know, I feel like this particular critique is just, if you keep bringing this up, it's just going to keep ending the same way, which is, the pacing to me was fine. You could be like, nah, it was too long for me.
Here's the thing. I don't want it to be a thing where I agree with you and say, like, I like everything that you like the whole way through, and then at the end of the movie, I come out 3 points lower for some reason. Like, when I have my issues, I want to point them out and say, here's why I have an issue with this.
Oh, no, absolutely. I just think, at this point, like, I think you've explained the core thing enough that you can just quickly shorthand apply it to things now.
I don't want a single comment saying how I should have not given it such a low score from this point on, unless you just completely disagree with me in my concept.
I mean, it depends how low you go. If you give it like a 3 out of 10, I think people have got a right to be like, wait a minute.
No, it's not getting that high at all.
No, so yeah, the next thing is that Jodie Foster realizes that if they can find the main phone line in the wall, they can like hook it up to the phone that's in there. And she doesn't really know what she's doing, but they're all color coded, so whatever. I'll buy that she could figure it out.
Actually, I think there's like 2 little mini things in the between here.
Is there? Okay, go on.
Yeah, so the first one is because she looked outside this pipe that leads out into the outside world, Kristen Stewart finds a flashlight and is determined to signal SOS to the neighbors across the street. I
actually really like this in that I appreciated that the guy just didn't get it and closed his curtains, because most people won't get this. Most people won't know. I appreciated that.
I appreciated it as well, of that song, because they even make the point of like, let's hope this guy was in Boy Scouts. Like, I appreciate the fact that he didn't get it. But I also really hated the way that they did it, was that they kept flashing the light right up until he actually got to the window, and then they thought that shouting in the middle of this thunderstorm across the street was going to save them.
Yeah, through this like 3-inch metal pipe.
Right. Yeah. I was like, no, keep flashing the light. What are you doing?
I do love that it's raining outside the entire night, though. It's good for atmosphere.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm digging that. I like the scene. I can concede that point. They should have just kept flashing the light, because like at least he's seeing something there, as opposed to hearing nothing. Although later on it sounds like he did hear something, maybe just garbled or didn't quite get what it was.
Yeah. Something. And then the second thing that happened in between, which actually leads right into the phone line, is they are watching the cameras. They realize that all of the people have moved away from the panic room, and so she goes out and she tries to get her cell phone.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, basically she's like, oh, my cell phone was next to my bed, and if they're like far enough away, and I do like the tension here, because she's about to do it, and Forrest Whitaker's actually standing in a dead zone where he's actually just at the door of the room, but the cameras just don't see him there, and she's almost about to go, and then like he steps forward and Kristen says, no, wait, and then he goes down to talk, because this is the part of the movie where Raul wants to talk to Jared Leto, and it's basically like, hey, we're not talking with that other guy, we're talking between us, because I want an equal share, I want $1 million, because this is when he's still claiming $3 million. So it becomes this thing where he's starting to like oust Forrest Whitaker, because he doesn't like how sympathetic he's being. He's like, he's starting to see him as like an obstacle. Yeah. And Forrest Whitaker, he gets involved in the conversation, and that's when he goes down the stairs. But I love that this entire like 10 sequence is played in silence, because the sound goes away as soon as the door opens, and she runs out to like try and get her phone. She's trying to find it, and it's under the bed. And as she's reaching for it, she knocks over the lamp. And I love that as soon as that happens, you don't hear it. You just like see their reactions in well, not even real time. It's slow motion. You see the reactions where they turn and start going up the stairs, and it's this build to get her back into the panic room. But of course, what she didn't realize is that this panic room completely kills phone signals, because it's thick steel, which sounds reasonable enough, to be honest.
I agree. I think that it's fine. I do think there should have been like the smallest bit of signal when she finally wises up and holds it right next to the outside area. But I'm willing to accept it is just that powerful. That seems fine to me.
Yeah, I mean, she could maybe text holding it out that way, like text the husband or something like, hey.
When I first got a cell phone, I grew up in an like absolute dead zone. So what I had to do every day when I got home from school was I broke apart the remote control to an RC car, snapped the antenna off of it, and duct taped it to the back of my phone to get just 2 bars of service so that I could communicate with the outside world. If I could do that, she could get a bar here.
That's such a weird part of David lore that we've just found out.
Yep.
So, yeah, but we had the phone line thing, and basically, Forrest Whitaker kind of starts to like, wait a minute, when I asked you to cut the phone line, and of course it was Jared Leto's character, when I asked you to cut the phone line, did you go down to the basement and cut the main phone line, or did you just cut the phone line going to the phone in the kitchen? And he's like, and it's like he's too embarrassed to admit that he just did the line in the kitchen. He doesn't want to say it, but it's clear that's what he did, because he's too nervous to actually say it out loud. But what's funny is that
I had this beautiful idea as I was watching it. I kind of wanted him to say like, I couldn't cut the cord in the kitchen, it was wireless. Like, I just wanted him to be like that extra level of stupid.
No, it doesn't go that far, luckily. But basically the Ethernet port's there, right, on the wall, so he rips that off, but the cable, the exposed cable's still dangling there because it's not been hooked up, and he's like, it's fine, we're okay. But just as he does that, Jodie Foster like yanks the cable, so they see it suck into the wall, and they start panicking. They have to run down to try and like cut the phone line before she can call anyone. Yeah,
because Jodie Foster, they ripped the phone that was in the panic room off the wall, and they're planning on splicing it in.
Yeah.
So that they can use that to call out.
Which they do. The police put them on hold.
Which, like, what? That's the part that bugged me the most. She's like, 911, and she immediately starts giving her information and says, please hold. And I'm like, why? Why would you ever put someone on hold after they are giving their information like that?
Yeah, here's the thing, right? So obviously there is a police station phone number locally everywhere that might put you on hold because it's not an emergency number, it's just to phone the police, right? But 911, the entire effing point of 911 is that it's an emergency.
Yeah. And like, don't get me wrong, I've heard about horrible 911 operators. I've heard horror stories of them like just hanging up or doing awful things. That's not this operator. This seems like it was just a thing that happens, and they just are like, oh yeah, 911 putting me on hold.
Yeah.
Just any other Tuesday.
So she then instead phones her ex-husband and gets the Nicole Kidman wife on the phone, who is basically just like, it's your ex-wife.
This is actually one of her great little character beats where she's talking to the thing, and she Nicole Kidman's not handing over the phone, just saying like, what do you want? And she just stands up for herself. It's like, put him on the phone, bitch.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, good job.
It's a little self-assertion moment. Yeah. And she only gets out half a sentence because basically Forrest Whitaker's trying to find the actual line in the basement, and he's having trouble getting to it. So Raoul just grabs the axe or sledgehammer and just smashes the entire thing. So it goes dead. But we find out soon that it was enough to make him think, oh, what's going on? Something's weird.
She got off the words, there are 3, and then the line goes dead. Yeah. So I do think this movie, now that I'm thinking about it, does a great job of giving us everything we need in the first like act of the movie, and then never introduces anything new after that. I mean, obviously not in terms of characters. We'll get a few more characters, but like this entire movie, we have the panic room, we have this building, we have one gun, and we have the sledgehammer. And that's really it. That's all you need this entire time.
Yeah, it even establishes the syringes that the daughter has for her blood sugar in the little fridge, and that comes up obviously quite a bit in the second half.
Yeah.
So it's after this though where Jared Leto's character Jr. basically says, you know what, this is too much effort. I'm giving up. I'll just inherit. I'll put in a call and inherit it. And they're like, wait a minute, this is more money than you were saying, you little shit. And when he tries to leave, Raoul just pulls out his gun and shoots him in the head. And it is quite a shift because up until this point, no one's actually gotten hurt. Jared Leto got burned a little bit, but that wasn't like an
Nobody
attack.
Important has actually gotten hurt.
But he gets shot in the head, and obviously this is not something that Forrest Whitaker wants to be a part of. He's like, wait, this is murder now. Like, what's going on here? And Kristen Stewart sees it on the camera, and in fact, it's after this, because all throughout the stuff in the panic room, Jodie Foster keeps saying, "Hey, how's your blood sugar?" She's looking at a little watch thing that tells her, and it's not too long after this where, understandably, her blood sugar is starting to struggle, because it's quite tense. It's a tense night for her, right?
Yeah, you'd be burning through a bit, just a tiny bit.
So she starts to obviously react to that, and she's starting to get sleepy, and she might go into a coma. And it becomes this thing where, she needs her medication, which is in the fridge. And again, the geography's been well set out. That was next to her bed, which means it's upstairs. So it becomes this decision at a certain point where Jodie Foster's going to have to make that trip. She's going to have to try and save her daughter.
But before we get to that, once Jared Leto is shot, a new character shows up in the doorway, and we are introduced to the husband.
The ex-husband, who immediately, Raoul just starts grabbing and punching and kicking the shit out of him, and demanding to know if he's called the police or anything, to which he says no. Turns out that was a lie, because the police show up say that they were called. But this becomes a thing, where he wants to just beat the shit out of the husband to try and make her come out, so they're doing it in front of the camera. And Forrest Whitaker doesn't like this, but he's just holding up his hand saying, look, this will stop if you just, come out, just please.
It's please come out. I don't want this to keep going.
Yeah. But obviously doesn't say this till later, when Raoul says that, the girl's seen my face. But Raoul's got a line later where he says, the price for one is the same as the price for many. Basically meaning, if he's going to get caught for murder, it doesn't matter how many he's murdered, really. He's going to go away or get killed for it regardless, so whatever. So that just gives you a little insight into his mind and into where his logic lies. So he's just ready to kill everyone. But
it's at this point Forrest Whitaker comes up with a actually really, really smart plan to kind of bait them out. So during the fight scene where they're kicking the crap out of the divorced father, one of the cameras is covered up. They cover up the camera so they're unable to see him getting beat up. And then the next thing that they see on the cameras is that Forrest Whitaker is dragging the body of Raoul downstairs, seemingly knocking him out after he put up too much of... he kicked the crap out of the dad too much. So with both of the men downstairs now, this is Jodie Foster's opportunity to go out to the fridge and finally do it.
Yeah. And when she leaves the panic room, it looks like the ex-husband's lying there on the bed, face down. He's maybe dead, or at the very least he's unconscious.
Yep. But she has no time to check, so she goes up, gets the syringes, and starts to come back. But it turns out that when they covered up the cameras, they just had Raoul and the father switch clothes. And Raoul's actually the one who was standing right there waiting.
Yeah, and he gets up and goes into the panic room. Forrest Whitaker goes in, and this is what's really smart. And this is why, when you were critiquing the third act earlier, I was getting ready. I do think there's a couple things at the very end that I think maybe aren't perfect, but I think
more of what I'm talking about.
Because I think the flip, where now Jodie Foster's outside the panic room, because she basically throws in the medication as the door's shutting, and then just pleads with them to give her the shot. And Forrest Whitaker, of course, is a good person at heart. He does want to do it, and he does, right? He gets Kristen Stewart to talk him through it, all that stuff.
There's this whole thing where now she has the gun as well. So he's telling him, the only way I'm going to be able to do that. Oh, and also Raoul's fingers got stuck in the door because, oops, turns out 2 lasers isn't enough.
Well, because his hand's in the middle part, so...
Yeah, exactly.
Which, to be fair, though, he's been the evil prick the whole movie, so this is cathartic for the audience. You're, enjoying this.
He deserves it 200%, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But it's one of these things where everything lines up perfectly of they want her to leave, get away with the gun. They need to open the door to free this guy's hand, and Kristen Stewart needs to get the shot. So... everybody has something they want from each other, and it just is, can we manage to negotiate this little 3-way deal here?
Yeah, and they make her go and stand at the bottom of the stairs whilst they open the door to get Raoul's hand back in. But it's a great flip of the setup, because the whole movie, for the first 2 acts, the movie's been, Jodie Foster and her daughter in the panic room, and the others try to get in. But now we have it flipped, where now Jodie Foster's on the outside in the house. She's got the gun, she's got the sledgehammer, She has everything, but they're in the room with her daughter. So all of a sudden, and I think this actually kind of extends to like, you know, I mean, they never really talk, I think, too much in the movie about the idea that maybe she could have lost her daughter in the divorce. But I do think this idea of her now being separated and having to trust that someone else is going to look after her maybe like kind of goes into that fear a little bit. That, you know?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it comes down more to she feels completely alone post-divorce. She feels abandoned and such like that. And her daughter's the only one she has left. And losing that would be just losing everything.
Just this idea that she's cut off from her kind of thing was going through my mind. But regardless, she starts going around the... Well, actually, did the police come first? Maybe they come first, because the cameras are all still there.
First, yeah. So they're able to see on the cameras there are police standing outside, and obviously Jodie Foster didn't call them. It's revealed that the husband did. And so they basically say, get rid of the cops, or we're going to kill your daughter. Like, if the cops enter in the door,
you say
she's dead.
Let's just specify, Raoul said this. Yeah. Forrest Whitaker ain't saying that. But yeah.
Forrest Whitaker's busy trying to break open a safe.
Yeah. But so Jodie Foster just sort of puts her hands up to the camera to say, hey, I'm going to deal with it. Like, I'm not going to like, and so the cop, like, you know, he's like, hey, we received this call from your ex-husband, and at this point they just mention it's 4 a.m, right? So we're in the middle of the night now, and she's been all tired, and she's pretending like everything's okay, and she has to come up with this reason why she called her husband, and she says, the end of the set, because he's like, what was the rest of the sentence? He said, you know, there's 3 things, and she's like, it was going to be, these are the 3 things I'll do for you if you come right now over and get in bed with me, right? And it's just this awkward bit of like uncomfortable humor almost, but I do like that the cops like, hey, if you like were in trouble but you couldn't say it out loud for some reason, you could signal, you know, maybe blink a lot or something right now. That might be safe to do. And I think what I like about this moment is that I think in her head she's actually like, should I? Like, is this the right call? Yeah. Like, because she knows they're in the panic room with her daughter, and even if the police do start helping her, like, her daughter might just be dead at this point, because, you know, Raoul might kill her just out of spite, even if they eventually have to come out and get arrested. So this is a choice she has to make in the moment. Do I try and get help because I'm in this situation that obviously needs help, or do I have to deal with this on my own because ultimately the circumstances are just like, because it's exactly what the circumstances that the villains were in before, where they're in the panic room and they can only choose to come out, right? Yeah. So she's in this predicament. I don't know. What did you think of this whole scene?
No, this is right up before that point where the cop like presses her saying, hey, you can give a hidden signal. I thought the scene was dragging. I thought it was just taking a really long time, because we know that it's going to end with the cops walking away. I don't think there's any doubt in the audience's mind. Like, clearly the cops are not going to come in right now and just bust down the door. But as soon as he offers up that option, as soon as he says, hey, you can give a little hidden thing, you come to realize, like, well, there's no audio on these cameras.
No.
They aren't able to see her mouth there. Maybe she's not aware of that, but she could pass along a message here, and that could change the trajectory of things. So I thought that was very well done. Like you said, you could see her struggling with the idea of it. Like, is it safe to tell them that? Can I give them some sort of warning here to let them know something's going on? But then ultimately she comes to the conclusion of, they can't do anything to help me right now. If they come in this house, she's dead. So I have to just do this alone. And I do think that's kind of, as you were saying, the transition of her becoming passive to active. Yeah. That's where she finally makes that final leap of, I could just take the easy way out here and say, yes, please come in. Horrible things are happening.
It's basically her, in a really dramatic way, obviously, but it's really basically her transitioning from being what she was before into being a single parent. Like, she's now the single parent who's going to take care of her kid on her own. And it's a movie, so everything's heightened to extreme, but that's the idea of it. So she comes back in, she's dealt with that, and clearly the cop, like, because obviously the show back up later, it's clear that he still got the impression something was up, like something wasn't quite right here, and obviously later on there's gunshots fired or whatever, you know, because they even mentioned, a neighbor said there was some yelling or something, you know, coming, but yeah, she goes around the house and starts knocking out the cameras with a sledgehammer, and I actually got a little chuckle here, because but Raoul looks at them and goes, wait, why didn't we do that?
I feel like that line in an original draft was meant for Jared Leto, and then they changed it so he was dead at this point. They're like, but it's too good of a line. We can't toss it.
Well, I think it's the idea that you're kind of like bringing Raoul down, because we've seen his face, and he does, he's got a good creepy look when we first see him without the mask. He feels very intimidating. But between the hand and then this, to make him look a bit like an idiot, and honestly, like in my head, I'm like, to be fair, I don't think it mattered that much that she could see you. I mean, maybe you could have done some sneaky shit like she's doing now, but it's not like it really affected your goal or what you were trying to do, right? Like they couldn't really do anything to counteract what you were doing on the outside, so that's why it never maybe came up. But it is a fun little moment of him being like, why didn't we like take away her sight of like the rest of the house? Because then she wouldn't have been able to time things like running out to grab something, or
she wouldn't be able to leave the room twice without us noticing.
Forrest Whitaker gets into the safe, but he helps Kristen Stewart. He gives her a shot, and she thanks him, right? In the whole movie, he's been very reasonable. He clearly doesn't want to hurt anyone. And when all this goes down, so Jodie Foster has given the gun to her ex-husband, who's still alive, right? But he's kind of like injured, his arm's broken, and she's taped the gun to his hand and like sort of propped it up on like a lamp post so that he can basically just like fire in one spot, right, at the bottom of the stairs. She's basically laying, as you say, a kind of a Home Alone-esque trap. And when they do come out of the panic room and they come down, Raoul has got the girl, and Forrest Whitaker steps out first. And it's notable that, Kristen Stewart shouts, "Don't shoot him, Dad." Like she's like sort of like trying to protect Forrest Whitaker here.
Well, even before we get to that point, it's the way she was going around the room. She was knocking out the cameras, but she also was going around with the key to all the doors, and she was purposely structuring like closing and locking doors so that these guys had to take one very specific path downstairs.
Oh yeah, because this happened earlier when she was out getting the medication. There was a tense moment because there was like two entrances into the room of the panic room. There's one from the main hall, and then there's one like through the bathroom that connects to another bedroom. And you see Raoul waiting with the gun behind the door, like he might just shoot her on the head if she gets like close to him.
She comes around the wrong way.
But she like basically has to rush him through the door. But there's a great shot where you can see down basically both hallways at the same time, and like she's coming down the other one that he's not at, like guarding the door on. And so it's a good moment. But this is part of the geography that it plays with here, where she is basically directing them through a specific route, so they'll have to come out in front of where the guy's holding the gun. So it's it's very effective in that case.
And we also see at this point that she is very clearly hiding in the elevator.
And she comes out and helps, of course, when Raoul goes to fight the ex-husband. And so the fight breaks out, and the big dramatic thing here, of course, is that Forrest Whitaker could get away scot-free, but he chooses to go back and save Jodie Foster because Raoul's going to kill her, right? He's got the sledgehammer, he's going to bash her head in, and I think he's choking her specifically by the time Forrest Whitaker comes in and shoots him.
He's got her down on the ground, like dazed and confused, and he's about to drop the sledgehammer on her head, more or less.
And he shoots him in the head, and that's kind of your big dramatic, like, and this is like an arc that I think you see coming from the start. He's always been this sympathetic character who doesn't want to hurt innocent people, and he makes this choice here to save them, and it leads to him getting arrested because he can't get away in time. He gets caught like in the back of the house.
The cops basically come in 1 second after everything is done, and they start swarming the house, and he's just still in the backyard. He's trying to get away, and the whole thing is that the money is in the form of bearer bonds, so it's just a whole bunch of pieces, like sheets of paper. And so he has to raise his hands up, and they're like, "Oh, let go of whatever you're holding." And because it's raining, because it's storming, this $22 million that he has spent the whole night trying to get just go off into the wind.
I guess it's like a morality lesson for him. Like, even though it's not fair that things didn't work out the way they should have, and you're struggling to, pay for your family or whatever, like making this choice, ultimately, you've learned that it was never worth it,
This movie is very much of the levels of punishment for different crimes. Like, it's not one of those absolutist things of, if you're a criminal, you get punished the same way no matter what. It's saying, no, Raoul was a far worse person than Forrest Whitaker's was, and so he got punished significantly harder than Forrest Whitaker does.
Yeah.
So it is still showing that you do bad things, you will get punished, but not, it's proportional.
Yeah, Jared Leto's in the middle. You could even argue the ex-husband for dumping his wife for a younger woman. That's why he gets beat up. That's why he doesn't die, of course, but he is pretty in bad shape by the end.
Yeah, pretty much. So there is one thing in this third act bit that I did want to cover, because it's not about padding. It's genuinely a structural issue, I feel.
Sure.
And that is, so they come around this corner and the father is pretending to still be capable of at least moving his arm. And so he says, hey, let the girl go or else I'm going to shoot you. And Forrest Whitaker's trying to reason it out. Like, yeah, no, that's fine. We'll let her go. You'll never see us again. Bye. But obviously they don't believe them because Raoul's a murderer at this point. So while they're being threatened with the gun, Jodie Foster sneaks out from the elevator behind them and attacks Raoul with the sledgehammer. She hits him in the face with it, full swing. He then topples over the railing and falls down a full story to the floor below. 30 seconds later, he gets up and just comes to attack them some more. Maybe that's just me. That feels like he's just Superman at that point.
No, I think that's a fair complaint. I did think when he gets hit in the face with a sledgehammer that he should probably, if not dead, he should be lying, coughing up blood and unable to stand up. Yeah.
He definitely should not be capable enough to not only climb up a flight of stairs, but then also manage to take out Jodie Foster, get stabbed a few times by Kristen Stewart, who brought along her needles from her EpiPen case.
Yeah.
And then also managed to lift the sledgehammer up and is about to drop it on Jodie Foster again. All of that just seems far beyond his capabilities of sledgehammer over the railing to the floor below.
No, I think that's fair. I think this is like your Hollywood movie, just like, oh, the killer has to come back for one last thing, basically. That's effectively what it's doing. And to be fair, if you accept it on the terms of this is a popcorn thriller as opposed to something else, which I think it is that it's Hollywood suspense. It's setting up rules, but it's a very good example, I think, of setting up the rules, playing with the geography, playing with characters, having the various degrees of villain, like you say. If anything, I would have almost liked, just because Forrest Whitaker does feel like I feel like he earns so much clout with the audience that it would have been nice to at least sort of see that. Oh, because Kristen Stewart and Jodie Foster maybe speak on his behalf at maybe at a trial or something. He gets.
I said that exact thing to my girlfriend after it was done. Yeah. I felt there was no wrapping up of Forrest Whitaker's plot. I think we see of him is hands up in the rain. I
think this is fair because, like you say, the moral kind of thing of the karma of he doesn't get the money. That's fine, but it does feel like he's deserved a light punishment versus the other two. Obviously he's going to get in trouble and he should, but the fact that he was going out of his way to save the victims, you would think would, at least get him some nice goodwill.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, obviously, I'm pretty sure that because he killed someone, that he's no matter what going to be on charge for manslaughter. But I would have liked to see no, he wasn't good, but we're not going to press charges on the more violent things. Well, maybe breaking and entering. That's all we're going to care about, sort of thing. But no, in the end, we get no resolution, positive or negative, for him. Yeah, it's just left up to whatever.
I think we can we can assume maybe that they speak on his behalf. They get whatever punishment he's going to have, cut down as much as it can be, whatever. I would like to think they do. I don't know, but we never get it either one way or the other. So it would be nice to have that. Like I said earlier, the final scene is we're in daylight again, and it's just mum and daughter sitting on a park bench looking at the vacant apartments and houses in the city. Where do we go to live? And that's how the movie ends. It ends with them looking forward to their positive future. So,
which I don't hear. I think back to our talking about Seven, which if you haven't seen Seven, I am gonna fully spoil Seven.
All right, spoiler. Just to give people a chance to turn this off.
I will put my hand down when I'm done spoiling Seven.
Right.
But at the very end of Seven, everything builds up, everything happens, and Kevin Spacey gets shot. Brad Pitt goes full psycho, and then the movie is done maybe 30 seconds later. Like,
it's very quick, yeah.
It's barely any denouement, just done. This movie, I guess I'm done there. This movie has the same sort of thing where it is done very quickly after this thing is done, but it doesn't have that same sort of feeling of closure to me. It doesn't feel like it's wrapped up the same way as Seven, you know?
I mean, it's not, I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that Seven is a better movie than Panic Room, because it is.
That's right.
But, you know, yeah, that builds up, so when it makes its final point, you don't need to say anything else. Whereas this, it feels like, because it didn't have, like, a key point that it was trying to, like, build up to, it could use a little bit of a coda almost for, like, surviving characters. But, you know, I don't think it affects it too much, because it is mostly about the thrills. It's mostly about the excitement of the one night in the house when there's good guys and bad guys and the sneaking around and all that stuff. And I think on all those fronts, it is a really fun movie. Which, you know, isn't this, I don't really necessarily think of fun when I think of David Fincher, but I do think this is a fun movie.
No, I could, especially with the fact that every time that it like is done with a sequence, it does a full fade out to black and then comes back to show time is passing. I could easily see this airing on like TNT or something at like 5 o'clock. Like, it's that kind of movie where it's not too heavy, it's not too like super artistic, or you need to really know all of this backstory lore. You just tune in, and then you could stick commercials in the middle of it and you'd still be fine. Yeah,
and the craft is really strong, barring, you know, again, maybe those CG transitions or whatever, but the actual presentation of the information, how the tension's built up. You had some problems, of course, with the pacing of some of the tension, thinking it went on a bit too long in places, but, you know, I think by and large it's a really solid, fun bottle movie thriller, and I have a good time. I liked it back then, I like it now. So I guess with all that said, we should rate Panic Room. David, what are you giving it?
For me, I liked everything in the first 2 acts, and even the entirety of like the third act up until the last 5 minutes, not even the last 2 minutes, where it felt like I got no resolution on a bunch of things that I really needed resolution on. And then, as I have said numerous times, the pacing in certain parts was off for me. But I love the concept. I think it does it very smart. I think it's written very well. There are funny moments, tense moments. They all play off each other well. Overall, I would probably say if I got a better resolution at the end, I would give it an extra point, maybe 1.5. But I'm going to come down on this with just I'm going to say just like a flat 7. I can't really realistically give it any higher than that. So
yeah, that's fair. That's kind of where I was thinking you were going, just based on what you were saying on the build up there. I think for me, it is definitely a bit stronger than that, and you know, I am in the minority of people, and I realize it is a very minor minority that thinks this is a better watch than Fight Club. But yeah, for me, I think it's probably a flat 8 for me. I think it's, you know, I don't think it's amazing. I don't think it's into, like, you know, special territory, but I think it's a really solid, good example of what it's doing, and I always have an entertaining time when I'm watching it. So 8 out of 10 for me.
Okay. But that does bring us to our special rating scale. Does this movie make the cut?
I think so. I think it makes the cut, because I think 7 is good. I think 8 is great. I think that puts us comfortably into, it makes the cut. Doesn't go a cut above, doesn't, you know, go into special territory. But
I agree. Rating wise, it seems like it should go there, but I also don't really feel like I have any drive to ever watch this again. I don't feel like it's something that if I was going out and making a David Fincher collection, that I'd be like, yep, I have to have my Panic Room. I feel like it is kind of just a forgettable film overall. So I would say cutting it close. I think it's up for the interpretation. I think it's, you know, there are people like you who thinks it's great, but I also think that it's not anywhere near the ubiquity of something like Fight Club, which, to be fair, you put in cutting it close as well.
Oh, I did? I stand by that. But I rated that much lower than you rated this.
You wanted it to go and not making the cut at all, and we compromised.
That's right.
I'm saying that this is the much more defined of cutting it close just by default.
I mean, I will concede. I will pick my battles elsewhere. I mean,
Okay.
I think it. I think it comfortably just lands in a nice, good place where it does make the cut, but I think there's more interesting fights to be had later on that I will not back down on. So
I will definitively put Benjamin Button as a cut above.
the jugular, maybe. So,
all right, so cutting it close, we're going with that.
I'll agree to it, but it's in minor protest though.
That's fine. I had major protests with the last one, so you're allowed to have your minor protest.
That's fine. That's fine. So yeah, coming up next time we have Zodiac, which tends to get a lot of praise, a lot of buzz. So we'll see how we feel about it when we get to it next time. Time to do some promotions here. If you want more shows, more episodes, you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And the regular bonus episode is coming to an end in a couple months and will be replaced by the Criterion Cut.
Yes.
The monthly show where we do Criterion movies. That is a public show for now, but will become the Patreon bonus in November, December time. But this month did have a bonus episode, and that was The Game, as I mentioned earlier, one of Fincher's movies to tie in with the rest. And also we have, of course, Extra Reels, which is our $5 and up bonus show, where we do a very, very bad movie. It's the opposite of the Criterion show, basically. This month we did, or are doing, depending on when this goes out, we did Steven Seagal's directorial feature on Deadly Ground. So if that sounds like something you want to hear us rant, rave, complain, and go a little bit crazy over, you can get that for $5 or more over at Patreon. So go check out that. But yeah, otherwise though, if you just hit the like button and stuff on YouTube, that does help out a lot. It helps people find the channel, helps people find the reviews, and the more people the better for everyone involved. So go and do that. But that's the show. That is Collector's Cut. Thank you very much for joining. We appreciate it. Keep watching the movies, and Kristen Stewart likes pizza.